Logan had this line as we were having the discussion that I thought was great. And he's like, in these Kyle Shanahan offenses, which is like half the league, the guy they're trying to manipulate is you. Taking your calls now, though, at 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Mark, who wants to chime in on our conversation about the Commanders' biggest weaknesses on the roster. Mark, go ahead. Thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. Hey, Anthony. Thanks for taking my call. I agree with you guys. I think, linebacker is a need. I don't think it's a glaring need. I like to pick a Medrano. But I wanted to ask you, Craig, like your thoughts, and I don't know if you have some insight on this. I was really shocked that Dan Quinn didn't go after, Adam Peters didn't go after Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker, former draft pick from Clemson, who's always been an athletic, just anomaly to me, and super fast, and I think can run sideline to sideline. I know he didn't work out in Arizona where he was drafted. He didn't work out with the New York Giants, but I've always wanted to understand, coach's philosophy. If you had a high grade on a player when they were drafted, do you put more weight on the fact that they didn't work out in their first few years in the NFL, or do you go back to your view of them and say, what you can do with them? Because I always know that, I knew that Dan Quinn was always touted for being able to develop people. So I was just like, man, there's a guy sitting there who would be cheap, who is athletic, who is great, who I think would fit in with Luvu and Wagner. And I just was blown that it didn't seem like he was even an interest of theirs. What was your thoughts?
It's a great question. Generically speaking, right? I think the Simmons piece is pretty easy, Mark, and that is Isaiah Simmons has not been a good NFL football player. And when you put it in the context of your question, that you could say, well, he hasn't been a good football player yet. But this is a guy who last year with the New York Giants, who weren't exactly crushing it on defense. They were looking for solutions, right? He only got on the field for 181 snaps. And it's not like he was hurt. He played, if I'm looking at this correctly, in all 18 games. He just played less than 30 snaps in all but one of them. He played 31 snaps in their game against Washington, ironically enough. So that is, I think, the answer when it comes to Simmons is, although I think that there are traits there, he hasn't been able to put them together in any meaningful way. His best season was in Arizona in 2022, and he did a fair amount of pass rushing that year, and that was good, or that was okay, I would say. But the idea that he could be this hybrid safety guy who could cover all over the field, run, make tackles, it's just not who he's been. I mean, last year in New York, for instance, he's got an 18% missed tackle rate. And his missed tackle rate's gotten worse every single year of his career. So I think that kind of explains the Simmons piece. But I think your question generically is a fascinating one, and one that I think it depends is, of course, the answer. But it kind of depends on why the guy hasn't worked out. I think if coaches like a guy and GMs like a guy coming out, and they look at how he's used, and they just go, I don't know what that other coaching staff was doing. Why would you possibly use player X in role Y? He's clearly a role X guy. Then you might bring him in and say, okay, let's go. Also, what was your scouting report like? Was there character concerns? Is this a guy that, if he comes in the right environment, maybe you get the best out of him? Or were there concerns and maybe where he went, you go, okay, those concerns probably got realized and we're not really that interested. And so I think it depends on why you think a guy didn't work out in a certain place, what you maybe think of the coach that had him, what you know about the position coach, what intel you're able to gather. But certainly, especially for a second chance, for Simmons, this is now a third team. But for a second chance guy, I think that there are a ton of coaches around the league that love a reclamation project because and you can say, it's a chance to get a guy on the cheap and it's good, smart team building. Or you can say on a more negative light, coaches have massive egos and GMs have massive egos and they love to say I can fix him when this other guy failed. But I think that does happen quite a bit. And it's just a matter of why did the guy fail in the first place? And do we think that we have the program schematically and environment wise that he can thrive with us?
Yeah, because I definitely hear what you're saying. I guess I looked at, probably alluding what you're pointing at, is that Isaiah Simmons, I didn't see like great defensive minded coaches in his staff at Arizona, and certainly not with the Giants. And I was just like, man, like, does it impact a player that much that, your first few years in the league, if you're coached poorly, you just have these bad habits or these bad traits? Because it's just like, if you took his tape, I mean, and I don't know, maybe this is not fair, but I'm just thinking, like, if you put Isaiah Simmons' Clemson tape on in this year's draft, I feel like he's a top 10 pick again. You know what I mean? And it's just like, man, how does that level of talent just go so unused and so unproductive when you're just like, this dude is awesome? You know what I mean? We were debating whether or not taking him or Chase Young at one point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's an athletic freak, but I think the thing about a guy like Simmons is when you're an athletic freak and you're playing in college, that athletic freakiness is enough to make you the baddest dude on the field. When you get to the NFL, everyone's an athletic freak. And so you go from being 30% more athletic than everyone else to being 5% more athletic than everyone else, and now you got to do other stuff. Now it's a mental game. Now it's a mentality. It's a physicality. It's a lot of other stuff other than being long, rangy, fast. And, you have to react in way, and you're being manipulated schematically, especially at the linebacker position. We were having a conversation on Take Command today about Kane Medrano and why we think that there is a huge potential upside for him. Now, it's a 6th-round pick. It's a long shot that he becomes like the next Fred Warner, but he at least has the movement skills that you go, it's possible. And a lot of guys coming in the league, it's not even possible. And Logan had this line as we were having the discussion that I thought was great. And he's like, in these Kyle Shanahan offenses, which is like half the league, the guy they're trying to manipulate is you if you're the linebacker. They're trying to pull you out of this passing lane for the wide receivers. They're trying to get you isolated on a tight end in a bad one-on-one matchup. And I think for a guy like Simmons, he is just never like, I don't know. His PFF grades and coverage are actually pretty good outside of last year. So like he does some stuff well, but he's never really, despite the fact that he's an athletic freak, that athleticism and the way he was able to use it at Clemson just hasn't parlayed itself into the NFL. And I do think that, to your thought process, the hybrid safety linebacker is a thing that Dan Quinn has had a ton of success with. And I think if they saw a potential hidden gem, they probably would have pursued it. But my guess is there's probably, whether it's character, and I don't necessarily mean that he's like a bad guy, but character in terms of his competitiveness, in terms of how he is as a teammate, in terms of the mentality and like how he plays on tape. Is there a certain level of aggression that he has that is required to really be a DQ Adam Peters guy? There's clearly something lacking there that I would have to study Simmons more as a player to understand what's missing. But I bet if I spent about 10 minutes doing it, I could probably figure it out, knowing the answer to the test that he is not clearly one of their guys.
He's not a commander. I can get that.
Yeah.
I can get that. What did you think about Justin Simmons, though, at safety? Because I think that's the position I think is the weakest, kind of what you guys are saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's an interesting guy, obviously super talented, super accomplished when he did in Denver, but he was also available for them to pick up the entire offseason last year into training camp until Atlanta did, and then he wasn't exactly awesome in Atlanta. I think sometimes the cliff comes fast for DBs, and Simmons is a guy that I wonder if it's come for. But, hey, Mark, I appreciate the call. Thanks a lot for checking in.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.